So I'm Kaylee Filio. I'm sales and marketing with PartsEdge, and we have Chuck Hartle, who is the founder of PartsEdge and resident parts expert. And I'm gonna say this because it just happened a couple weeks ago. He's actually known as a parts wizard. So I think I need to add that to our website that people are calling Chuck a parts wizard. Chuck, I'm going to let you take over. And today we're talking about pricing and going over all of that fun stuff. So I'm going to let you go for it, Chuck.
All right. Thank you, Kaylee, for the introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Thanks for joining us today. Wizard, might have to cut a bigger hole in the door, but to be quite honest with you, I live by one philosophy, and that is I don't drink the perfume, I smell it. So there you go. So, flagpole up, flagpole down based on, the people we talk to and the managers we deal with. Today's subject, some of the stuff, if you've listened to me before, is going to be a little bit of rehash, but one of the things that I really want to emphasize about this pricing session the number one thing we deal with here at PartsEdge, inventory control. Number two, by far, pricing. Looking at pricing, especially with warranty uplift, things like that. We've done a lot of wholesale analysis lately. Is it worth it to be in wholesale and so forth? But today, what we're really going to focus on is we're going to focus on customer pay and working through that. Because one of the things we've seen over the last few years is there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes by your manufacturer, maybe at your dealership, whatever. And what we want to do is get your juices flowing, get you thinking about how to build an effective pricing program. Matrix is a very small part of it. And as I go through this, you'll see that. Basically, what we want to do is see where you can increase your grosses in your parts operation and where you can make the biggest effect within your parts operation to do that. And so here we go. So the first thing that you do as we go through this whole process, and this is what I'll cover today, is, the 4 steps building an effective pricing strategy. Well, number one, the first thing you got to do is evaluate what's going on. Where are my grosses? I can't tell you how many times we've had phone calls or gone over with parts managers or dealer principals. My gross profit is terrible. It's at 34% on customer pay, or we've even seen some as low as 28, 29%. What could really be causing that? We use a matrix, but my gosh, look at what we got. Then the next one is to investigate. Once you know this, investigate, and we'll show you a way to investigate it very simply by pulling your customer pay RO sales over a period of time, but to investigate what's really dragging down that gross profit. Then the process of implementing, of course, and then periodic review. That's really important, to sit and periodically review how it's working, okay? So, in any dealership parts operation, you basically have these profit centers right here. You have customer pay, which we're going to deal with today. Counter ticket, customer retail. For most of you listening here, that's a very small portion of what you do anymore. There's not a lot of do-it-yourselfers out there anymore. Mechanical shop and body shop collision. Some of you may do a lot of body work, some of you may not. We're not going to deal with that today. Today, what we're going to focus on is customer pay, repair order sales, and how your grosses work through that and what you can do. So I'm going to start with a very easy slide that I bring up all the time, and it's focusing on customer pay RO sales. When you think about other retail, such as Costco, Walmart, Home Depot, your grocery stores, we tend to be inundated with advertising bombardments daily through print, email, and social media. I know one thing that happens a lot now with these AI bots, if all of a sudden you look something up in Instagram or Facebook, you happen to look at something, next thing you know, you get a whole bunch of ads for it. I just recently had my daughter show me a Pilates machine, and she says, yeah, this is what I used when I went to my Pilates class. I'm telling you, I'm on Facebook, and now all I get is Pilates machine ads. So we get inundated with that. But one thing one thing I've never ever seen within Facebook, within these AI bots, so to speak, is I've never ever seen an ad for, hey, come get your oil changed at our dealership. Okay. We don't seem to be involved in the AI bots with all this mass marketing that we say. But one of the things that they always push is, hey, this is on sale today. And as it says at the bottom of the slide here, it says, what's on sale today is not necessarily on sale tomorrow. You got to remember grocery stores and Walmart, all of them, they have a whole department of people who are just marketing, getting ready to send next week's information to you at discounts to drive you into the store. So typically there was a word that we used to use all the time, and in these ads, this is exactly what it is. It's called a loss leader. That you're going to discount this to get them in to try and upsell them, get them to buy more, right? So thinking about all of that, and it really drives the point home at the dealership level, we need to start thinking a little bit more like that. What we see, and this slide really points it out, when was the last time you updated your pricing strategy? Think about that. When was the last time you updated your parts pricing strategy? And I'll tell you what, if you want to be transparent and you want to post it in the chat and let me know when you last reviewed it, that would be great to see. Because what we typically see is dealerships' parts pricing strategies are rarely changed and rarely reviewed. And a lot of times the parts managers, where we see them fight a lot, where, hey, don't mess with this, tends to be in the wholesale arena. Because on the customer pay end, the internal end, or whatnot, the pricing is pretty much dictated through the fixed ops director, the service manager, or whatnot. And so they tend to get a little upset, or if you want to mess with your cheese, the cheese tends to be wholesale, but they go, my prices are set this way. My service department has them set this way, and we just can't do anything about it. Well, let's delve into that and see what we can't do to maybe change that mindset and give you a way to really effectively make a difference and adjust your pricing. And it's not just the matrix, it's everything else overall. One of the things that we've certainly seen, we have seen a lot of people lately that have updated their matrix for one reason only: warranty uplift. We want to get a better markup on warranty uplift. So they go in, they increase the matrix to try and get a sampling of 100 repair orders to get that warranty markup to cost plus 80 or 90, or in some cases, we've seen it as high as cost plus 100. But when it comes back down to the actual strategy of doing it, there's not much thought put into it, and there's always the menu and maintenance items that can make a big difference here. One of the things we used to live by 10, 15 years ago, and this is the first exercise. So if you want to focus in here, this is the first thing I tell you to do in that evaluation. Because it used to be we could all depend on cost plus 67 or a 40% profit margin. You could take $10 and divide it by the reciprocal of 67, and you get 1667. $6.67 divided into 1667. Guess what? There's your 40% profit margin. One of the things we've discovered lately, and this is why this first exercise, as you start to delve into it, may find out why some of your grosses have gone down, is we've found out the manufacturers are changing the difference between cost and suggested retail. And I really want to focus on that word, suggested retail. It means just that. It is the suggested retail. We run into a lot of dealerships that say, we sell all of our parts at suggested retail. We don't use a matrix. I had one dealership, and this is, my gosh, about 12 years ago, and I love to bring this up to really emphasize it. We were working with a dealer group in the Chicago area, and there was a lady who was basically I guess you would call her the dealer principal, are certainly, uh, she oversaw these 4 dealerships that we were working. We had been working with them for a few years, and she called me up and she asked me to jump on a plane and fly there. And she said, I'll pay your costs, everything. I'll even have a limo waiting for you at O'Hare. It ended up what we would call Uber now. You know, it was Lincoln Town Car, but some guy was there waiting for me with a sign. I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I went directly to the dealership. I went up to the office, and inside the office were several general managers. The lady, her name's Denise, and about a dozen people. And I sat at the head of the table, and over about the next half hour, she let me have it. I felt like a 5-year-old. And she was talking about how all of a sudden their gross profit on customer pay had dropped by 9%, and the pricing we had implemented was not working at all. Well, I have to tell you, we never implemented the matrix, and I felt like, boy, I'm getting, dumped on here on something I didn't even know was going on. It was like really getting blindsided. I literally walked out the door after a half hour and walked into the bathroom, and I started to call the limo service to come pick me up. I thought, my gosh, she flew me 2,000 miles to fire me. And there was a fixed stops guy in there from the Chris Gollins group, and some of you have heard that. He came into the bathroom. He goes, I know what you're doing. Don't do it. Don't do it. Let's go back in and get direct with her. So I went back in. She started to cut loose on me again about all these problems. I finally said, stop. I said, I didn't cause this problem. I will help try and solve the problem for you. And that night we went to the hotel, and this is the whole point of this story. We went back to the hotel, and what we found out was BMW had gone in and changed their suggested retail from a 40% profit margin, cost plus 67 equals 40% profit margin, as you see on the slide. They had changed their suggested retail to cost plus 40%, a 28%, 28.6% profit margin to be exact. They had changed it on all their maintenance items, and they sold all of their maintenance items at suggested retail. Hence, it drove their gross profit margin down by 9%. Unbeknownst to them, the problem wasn't PartsEdge. The problem wasn't the parts manager. The problem was BMW adjusted their retail price to cost plus 40, or a 28.6% gross profit margin. So, is your manufacturer doing that to you? How would you know? Well, let's give you an exercise that's really simple to do. What you do, this is just a review here where we pulled a specific manufacturer. This happens to be Honda. But we pulled and found out, hey, there's only a 35% profit margin on some of these products. How do you accomplish this? I'll tell you what, this could be the simplest exercise, if you focus here, pay attention, that you could easily do at your dealership. What you do is you go in and run a report, capture a report. Hopefully you can capture it into a spreadsheet or even into a text file and then parse it into an Excel spreadsheet. But run a report on your part inventory, all the part numbers in your inventory. Make sure that you've captured the cost in the list field. Part number, cost, and list. Get that into the spreadsheet. Now subtract your list from your cost. List from the cost in a column that gives you what the profit margin is. Then create a fourth column and now divide the profit margin back into the suggested retail, and that will give you what we just looked at. And I'll go back here. That will give you what your profit margin is. a simple exercise to really figure this out. Now, one of the things that we just did this last week, I did it for a BMW client that happened, to be over in California, but we were going through what's the best matrix to do. Do we do it from cost plus or from list plus? Well, one of the things when they're playing with your different averages is doing it from a list plus when all of a sudden there's only a cost plus 40 or 28% profit margin. That can make a big difference. When you do it from a cost plus, you can lock in your gross profit, okay? When I did this analysis at the BMW store last week, BMW, by the way, they turned off that 28.6% because a bunch of people complained. But now when we look at BMW, and I'm picking on them, but they're not the only one. When we did this last week, we found out that about 75% of all their products, all their parts, the difference between cost and suggested retail was a 34% profit margin, 34 to 35, which, by the way, equates to cost plus 52%, not cost plus 67%. So if you've been selling everything at suggested retail as a BMW dealer, and all of a sudden you see that they've dropped this, makes all the difference in the world. I hope that makes sense to you. And this is the first thing you want to do as you try to evaluate, how am I going to retail my customer pay RO parts? Forget the matrix, we're getting there next. Now we got to look at, what if I'm going to sell everything at suggested retail, is the manufacturer giving me a fair gross? On the other side, we've done this a couple of times for GM stores, and we found out on a lot of the GM maintenance, they actually have a 50% profit margin instead of a 40% profit margin. They actually have increased some of their suggested retail for that. Pretty interesting. So anyway, exercise number 1, a counter pad, part number, cost list, subtract it, get a profit, divide it back in. Now sort it by descending gross profit. You'll find out what suggested retail is from your manufacturer. Let's come up for air a little bit here because we're going to move into matrix. Does anybody have any questions? If you do have questions, by the way, please feel free over in the chat. You can type your question or you can raise your hand and Kaylee can let you ask the question or whatever, up to you. But that chat window is a great place to sit and communicate with us. And hey, this webinar is for you folks. What we're trying to do is get your juices going and all of that. And okay, Kaylee says she's not sure you can come off of mute, but at least please ask the question. We want to answer any questions you may have about this because we want you to totally understand this, okay? So as we sit and look here now, you're looking at that 40% rule, and we've gone through that. So now we're going to move in. Let's talk about matrix. This would be a typical matrix table. It's based off of cost. So we have these different escalator categories, okay? And you can see that this particular dealership, from a penny to $10, they escalate their costs 100%. They double cost, 10 to 25, 80%, and so forth. Now, to understand this and to get, I guess you would call the right verbiage down, each one of these are what we call an escalator category. A penny to $10 is a category. $10 to $25 is another category, and so forth. So when you look at this, each low to high dollar value is considered a category. And when you're going to analyze how your matrix is working, you want to be able to go in and look at it based on, I want to capture a report of my customer pay sales and be able to sort it. Since this is from cost, I need to sort it by my cost so you can isolate the escalator like $25.01 to $100. We'll get to that in a minute and go through that report. But now, one of the things that you can do, if you go out and capture your escalator or your matrix in your setups. And you really want to see what kind of gross profit using a matrix like this would it yield. This slide evaluates it. You can simply do it by putting it into a spreadsheet. Here you can see from a penny to $10, you're escalating it, cost plus 100. That's a 50% gross profit yield. That's that far right column there. You see that the yield is 50%. 10 to $25, 44. 25 to 100, 42, and so forth. You now know what your yield is going to be based on what you're going to implement with your matrix. One of the things, and I'll get to this in a minute, is it's amazing what we see if more than 15% of your parts are truly being matrixed. You're doing pretty good. We tend to see that 80 to 85% of all customer pay RO sales this day and age are menu priced or not matrixed at all. And that's why I can very safely say, many of you listening here, you're leaving money on the table. You know, matrix tables, we see these unrealistic matrix tables. And what we do is we look at the overrides and they're getting overridden anyway at the sale point. And the reason being is, you know, all of a sudden they got cost plus 600 on a penny to $2. And all of a sudden it's $40 for 10 plastic clips. And the counter people go in and override it. And the ROV report shows that. Doing seminars many times, I said, bring your matrix and bring your override report. And we see that. And then when I ask the manager, ask he or she, why all these overrides? They go, well, it's kind of unrealistic. And I go, okay, make it realistic. You want your counter people, the people selling the parts, to manage the sale, not the sale and the sale price. So with that being said, one of the things you can do here if you lay out your escalator. Now, let's play with if we're going to increase or change our escalator, what would be the impact? So this next slide here, we're looking at what if we took a cost plus 80 standard and bumped it 10%. And we went in and we pulled, you know, we just pulled a store and said, okay, current, we sold $12,521 at cost plus 80, and we made a 44% profit. I'm going to go back one slide because where that is right here. This is the $10 to $25 category, escalator category. So what we did is we went, okay, this is what reality was, what we sold under this matrix, made that 44%. What if we went and made that escalator category cost plus 90 now? What would it have yielded? And you can see here that all of a sudden the sale price went up, the gross jumped up by a little over about $1,100, and now you're at 47% gross profit instead of 44. So now the real acid test comes, and this is where doing the investigation means pulling your customer pay history over a period of time, just to see how much is really being matrixed and where am I leaving money on the table. In this simple example, and I just took a snapshot of where we did an analysis, and this happens to be a GM store in the 1273-5811 part number here. As we pulled it and put it in and sorted it by descending gross, we saw they were making 39.02%. They were selling it at a set price of $561, and it was 39.02% gross profit. One of the things when you do something like this, when you capture it, you create that gross profit list and sort it by descending gross and then by part number. And this is where things stick out. Folks, we've actually seen in some of these reports where they're making 8 to 10% gross profit on some of these maintenance price menu items. And one of the things that we've really discovered by going through this, your manufacturer over the last 5 years since we came out of COVID toward the end, of course, there's been a tremendous amount of appreciation. The manufacturer has raised the cost of goods. Well, the other thing that we've seen is those menu priced items, and I appreciated the one comment back there that was made by Eric that the last time he updated it was October of 2024. Well, if you still sell an oil filter for $9.20 like this dealer was, and the cost now is $6.50 on that oil filter, but you're still selling it at the same margin, your gross shrinks because the cost of goods went up, but you left the fixed price that way. You need to make sure that your menu priced items follow the increase in the cost of goods from your manufacturer. Now, a roadmap, how do you pull it? Every manufacturer has the ability to do this. What you do is you go in and run a date range. I usually suggest between 60 and 90 days to get a good mix of what has happened in your customer pay. You pull that up, and then once you pull that report, get the customer name, number, whatever, but you got to get cost and sale price. And then most of these will actually have a gross profit field. You don't have to subtract the cost from the sale price. It's already done for you. Get it in there. Now you got to create that gross profit percentage field, which again is really simple. Just divide your gross profit back into the sale price. Now you're going to get that percentage. Then sort it by descending gross profit by part number so that now you can really start to look at, now you got your Escalator category. You can print that out and look at it and go, okay, in this category, a penny to $10, how many parts did I really sell and where did I actually realize that I made that 50% profit margin? Anything under that, oops, it wasn't matrix. In that other category, 10 to 25, sort that by descending gross profit. If it wasn't at 44%, oops, that's a problem. And what we tend to see is, again, once we analyze and look at what truly got matrix on customer pay, 10 to 15%, and we've seen some dealers much higher, around 40%. We've seen some dealers as low as 1% gets matrix. So a lot of times when you sit there and say, let's change the matrix, this will get our grosses up. I'm here to tell you, when that's only 5 to 10 to 15% of your overall customer pay sales, tweaking your matrix and making it high is not going to affect the overall gross as much as looking at some of the menu priced items that can make a huge difference in increasing your gross. And remember, folks, I really want to emphasize this. Changing and raising the price, like going back to those oil filters, going and adding 80 cents to it and making it, $10, or going into a set of brake pads and marking them up another $5 or an air filter, $2. That's huge. You don't have to go in and all of a sudden try and matrix them to make back your money. You just have to tweak and adjust it so that you're making, especially on menu priced items, you should be somewhere between 25 to 30% minimum on gross profit on menu items. We see oil down around 8, 9%. The only thing I ever throw out, because it's so stinking competitive, is tires. We typically see most dealerships, they sell tires at a cost plus 15 or cost plus 20 because they have to remain very competitive in that market. But all the other things, we see a lot of things have never been moved to help that gross. Here's an example, again, where I just took a sampling on one that we did. This happened to be a Chrysler filter, 6819 1349 AC. You can see here that their cost was $765. Their sale price was $898. They were making $1.33 gross, 14.81%. And so you wonder what drags down your overall gross profit on customer pay. My friends, this is what does it. You want to look for these low gross profit parts where you can tweak them up a buck or two to start making the difference. And, one of the things I really want to emphasize here is that your pricing is never set in stone. Just like you get the fluctuation every week, hey, what's on sale today is not on sale tomorrow or next week from all the different retailers that you deal with. Well, the same thing goes with you. Typically we find one of the biggest reasons they don't want to move things is the service department has set menu pricing. And so it's really tough to go in there and make some of these tweaks. Well, I'll tell you what, to get the grosses up and remain profitable, that's something that needs to happen. So here's an example, just now kind of backing through some of the things. Looking at, here's where we pulled a GM dealership and we looked at their customer pay RO sales. And this was an overall. And we went and pulled and looked at all their CPRO sales. And out of 3,477 pieces sold, 41 of them, basically, folks, that's about 1%, were being matrixed. And when they matrixed it, they made 51.81%. But the 3,436 parts that they sold, other than that, 34.79. So when you see their overall gross is 36.84, you can see here, whatever matrix they were using, it wasn't working. That's an eye opener. And we run into this all the time. We get people who call up, I wish I had a dime for every time I had a dealer or a parts manager say, we need to raise our matrix. We just got back from a 20 group. We're at 37%. We got a guy in our 20 group who's sitting at 43%. Raise our matrix. We want to do it. You do it here, it won't make any difference whatsoever. It'll be like just a drop in a swimming pool. Where you're going to affect these grosses is looking at overall what's truly being matrixed, overall where my menu pricing is, and you don't have to make an excuse to make a fair profit. Now let's deal with adjusting price codes and discounts and whatnot. We've talked about capturing and finding out what your matrix, what suggested retail is from your manufacturer, how to look at your escalators and break that out based on pricing and capture your customer pay. Then we get to implementation and so forth. Adjusting price codes and discounts or the matrix is, again, like I emphasized, never set in stone. You know what? If you put in a new matrix today and all of a sudden people are questioning it, all you have to do is back it off. You'll never know if you don't try. I'll give you a perfect example. I brought this story up many times, but I love it because this was the first time I really realized that your pricing is never set in stone. I had a fixed ops consultant come in. I was a fixed ops director. And I had him come in primarily for service because I didn't know crap about service. I just had a great service manager who made me look good. And I had him come in and we built up a bunch of stuff in the service department, lateral support groups and whatnot. Well, then he asked me, he said, what about your pricing matrix? How's that working? I go, well, don't touch it. I think we got that handled. And he goes, no, let's take a look at it. So we took a look at it and I was hanging right about 39.5%. And he goes, how would you like to get over 40%? I went, well, enlighten me. Well, everything I covered, we went in and tweaked each category about 2 or 3%. After he left, about a month later, he called me up. We went over things. They were going great. He said, by the way, what's your gross profit on customer pay? I said, hey, we're up almost a full percent. We're at like 40.5%. He goes, great. I only got one question for you. What's the question? Did anybody complain? I go, no, not at all. He goes, go in and bump it another 2 or 3%. Really? Hey, nobody's complained. You haven't found, listen to this, you haven't found your market threshold. So I went in, tweaked it a couple of more percent. The next month, we were just over 41%. And you can only guess the next month he called up, did the same thing. We bumped it a couple of more percent. I got up to 42%. And I felt very comfortable at that point. And I told him, I'm happy here. I know what to do if I want to increase it. Case in point, it's never written in stone. Experimenting with these areas of pricing can really make a big difference when you're tweaking or adjusting things. Again, the bottom of the slide says it all. If no one ever complains about pricing, tweak it up a bit until they do. You can always dial it back down. Reviewing the reports and the benchmarks. Statistically, if 10% or more of your CP sales are matrix, you're doing pretty well. Again, we've run into people that are 40%. We go, congratulations, you are definitely in the upper 3 percentile. Again, identify low gross items where those slight price increases can really make an impact on your gross. Make sure to check those sale prices. Have the manufacturers gone in and decided to tweak the difference between costs and suggested retail? That's the first starting point. Then make sure to work with your service department to expand the menu items and so forth. Get those increases. And again, here, if less than 10% of your parts are matrix price, avoid over expanding these categories too quickly. Because you'll find out the captive items that you do have an opportunity to matrix, we see some of these matrices just sale-proof parts because they're just unrealistic. And again, I can't emphasize how much review the sale override report to identify where the overrides are happening that could lead to low matrix pricing, or again, your matrix table is too unrealistic. Make sure to ensure that too many parts aren't classified as maintenance items. It seems like literally everything is a menu maintenance item, from air filter, oil filter, brake pads, spark plugs, and whatnot. Remember that term loss leader way back, half hour ago. We had a dealership in Texas, and this is one of those stories that really stuck out. I went and did an analysis, and they were losing a dime on every oil filter that they sold on customer pay. They were losing $1 in bulk oil. They were losing $5 in labor. So, add it up, and, they were losing about $7 on every oil change that they did. I called up the CFO, and I said, do you realize that your stores, you're losing money on oil changes? And what the CFO said to me really blew my mind, but it really stuck to what loss leader means. He goes, don't change a thing. I do that on purpose. I go, really? And he goes, yeah, I want my employees, from the parts people, the service writers, and the technicians, if they think they're just going to live on oil changes, they're seriously wrong. One of the things I can point out to you folks, they had the highest upsell rate of any dealership I ever saw. They said, if you're going to live on oil changes, you're going to write me a check back. And I thought, wow, that's a different philosophy I'd never seen. And they didn't discount a lot of other services, to the point they did very well in their upsell, driving people in with cheap oil changes and making sure that they upselled to make their grosses. Final review. Again, check your price codes and your price levels. Sometimes where we see a difference, and you'll find this out by doing an analysis, all of a sudden we see a dealership adds a new labor type. This typically seems to happen with CDK and Reynolds clients mostly. The service manager goes in and adds a new internal labor type. Well, in their accounting tables or in their breakout tables, the default sale account is customer pay. And they add an internal and they don't define it as internal. That's in Program USA on CDK and 3636 on Reynolds. And what ends up happening now is now they start using that internal labor rate, and it closes to the customer pay sale account. And all of a sudden, as you're going through that, you go, wow, look at this. We're only making 20% on our sales. And then you discover it was sold under an internal labor rate and somebody just didn't have it defined. We find that all the time. Okay. And several of the manufacturers, or these are DMS vendors, all the price codes on the service side are totally driven by service labor types. So that's where a service manager could go in and tweak a price code unbeknownst to the parts manager. Hence, that could change some things as well. Source accounting issues could be a problem. But anyway, once you investigate and pull that report and look at some of these low gross items, these kind of things might stick out. An extensive review of your customer pay, gross profit sales is a must, and not occasionally. I'd say minimum quarterly. And you might want to develop some reports so you can look at it on a monthly basis. Anyway, hopefully I've gotten through to some of you to got your juices going. Remember, this this PowerPoint presentation, Kaylee will be sending it out, so you can always go back if there's something you wanted to look at, wanted to go back on, or something like that. You can always open up this PowerPoint and go to the slide that, this Yahoo Chuck put out here, so you can look at it. But I just want to tell you, in fact, Kaylee says she'll send the recording along with the PowerPoint. So, you could go back over and review this or show it to any of your department managers or whatnot. So I just wanted to emphasize that. This is probably the number one thing next to inventory control and obsolescence that we've been dealing with here at PartsEdge for the last several years. It's becoming really important to sit and track where our sales are. And, it's not just important enough to have the part, it's how you're going to sell the part and maintain grosses. With that said, I'll say thank you. Thanks for spending time. I see quite a few of you on here. This is really great. I hope it made some sense. And at this point, I'll open it up for any questions before we close.
And if anyone wants to raise their hand and try to go off mute, we can do that as well. I can't remember if I adjusted that setting. If you can't go off mute, then go ahead and send it through the chat.
We'll give it a minute or two here. If you're all done and you don't have any questions, feel free to leave. Thank you. And thanks for joining us.
All right. I don't see anyone typing.
Nope. All righty.
Thank you, Chuck. That was great. And we'll do this again next month. We do these the second Thursday of every month. And I have some ideas for topics, but if you guys want to send some our way, please feel free. Can't tell you what we're going to do next month because I haven't gotten that far. But I'm working on it.
I leave it up to her. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll talk all day, folks. So, give me a subject and I'll talk all day. I wanted to keep it at 45 minutes, and guess what? We're right there.
Yeah. It'll probably be inventory control of some sort, sources, that kind of thing. But all right.
We'll go through stock replenishment programs. Ooh, there you go.
Ooh, that might be a good one.
All right. All right, everyone.
Thank you, Chuck.
Hey, thank you all. Have a great day.